IT Babble fans, this is another IT Babble weekly rant. Today, we're going to be talking about something I like to call the island of garbage. What is the island of garbage? Well, I'll get into that in just a moment. First, I would like to tell you a story. Last week, I was working on a project, and the department I was working with needed to move a bunch of files. Now, when I did a file analysis, I realized that they had maybe 5 times as many files as any other department. And I thought this was really strange because they're not producing 5 times as much anything back into the school. And as far as I know, they're not authors, they're not writing dictionaries, so I was really confused. Now, they do have a lot of photos, but still, it was a massive amount of data. So the current storage unit that they're keeping their files on is a Linux-based server. So we were able to do some in-depth calculation on the files. And after we ran that analysis, we came up with this number, 97%. 97% of their files had not been accessed since 2014. So in about the last 3 years, they've used 3% of their files. 97% just sitting there, doing nothing. They're not opening them. They're not looking at them. They're just garbage. They're just sitting there. They're using a very small percentage of their files because that's what you would do. You would only use what's relevant. And here's the worst part. The way that they have their files structured, if I wanted to try to find something, it would be impossible to search for it efficiently, and I would need 2 months to individually comb through all the files. There's something like 2 terabytes of unused data. It's crazy. So, obviously, this is a problem. This is obviously not the norm. As I said, it's abnormal, and it's only because they have a special non-cloud based storage system that allows for this to happen. Reflecting on that, I thought about what happened to me on 2 occasions where I was at an organization, 2 different organizations, and I wasn't in charge of the email at the time, but in both of these organizations, they lost all of their email. One organization lost 6 years worth of email, and then the email system wasn't even recovered for 5 days. The other organization lost about a year and a half worth of email, and it took about a week to set up a new system, and again, the email wasn't recoverable. In both of those cases, and in the one case where they lost years and years of data, we're talking over 200 employees. In both cases, nothing happened. That's right. I know you were thinking, we're all gonna die. But that's not what happened. Literally nothing happened. Once the new email service was set up in both organizations, things worked fine, and it was normal. It just continued. We found out in both those cases that people that had things that were critical and who were professional stored those items somewhere, and email wasn't for storage, and that conversations they'd had in the past weren't really that relevant. If they lost something from a supplier, they just contacted the supplier. But having a debate with your coworker and being right and keeping that debate in your email so that one day you can go to a meeting and be like, boom, I was right. First off, that doesn't ever work. And secondly, again, you're never going to remember to get that for that meeting. It's just not going to happen. I was just checking my email from 2013 till now, and I have 35,000 messages. Now, some of those are status notifications, some of them are like little system alerts, and some of them are from suppliers. But 35,000 emails, I might as well just delete them all. There's not a conversation in there that's going to change anything in the future. And again, if I've had a conversation with someone and they were difficult, when that conversation is over, that is the only point where I can do something about it. That's when I need to engage them or contact their manager. It's not 2 years later. It's not, oh, look what you said in 2013. I actually have some people I've worked with who do that. They will come into a meeting and say, "Well, you told us this, and it's not true now." And I will be like, "What are you talking about?" And they produce an email from like 3 years ago that is completely irrelevant and not connected to what we're talking about. That doesn't hurt me. It's never hurt anybody. It's irrelevant. It makes them look quite foolish. So, again, tons and tons of files just everywhere. So many files that you can't even go through, manage, or index or search. And so much email that you can't manage, that you can't search, and that will be useless for you in the future. That creates the island of garbage. Now, you might think, Tony, no, you're wrong. My ideas are golden. Well, let's reflect outside of education, because there is a whole world outside of education that's using data and information much faster than we are. And that's where I look to see case studies and scenarios to see how things play out on a larger scale. Because when you do that, you can often offset problems that are going to happen in a slower moving industry like education. I was just reading Flash Boys by Michael Lewis, Flash Boys, and one of the people that he talks about is this Sergey guy. I'm not going to butcher his last name. Anyway, this guy was one of the first. He's kind of famous because he's one of the first people to ever get arrested and put in federal prison for emailing himself computer software, not software, code, just code that he'd written. And he was working for Goldman Sachs, and he wrote a bunch of code for their trading platform. Now, some of the code, a lot of it, was built on open source, and he always kind of identified that code as like reusable and portable. And technically it is, but he had mixed it with some proprietary stuff. Even though it was proprietary, like he had made it for Goldman, it was based on their systems. So, okay, we're not going to talk about whether or not this guy was like moral or immoral or whatever. What we're going to talk about is this one horrible concept. When Goldman finally realized that after the guy left, he had taken the code, obviously they called the FBI and he was arrested, and he was carrying it on a USB. He was carrying just all his like programs that he'd written on a USB. And like me, the FBI decided to run some analysis on the USB and found out he had never opened the files. This guy was walking around for weeks with this allegedly sensitive, I can make you a multi-billion-dollar company software. He never even opened it. It's just because he had written it and he had kind of an attachment to it, and he thought, oh, maybe one day I'll look at it. He took it with him. The fact is that after analysis of Goldman and his new company he was going to, they found out that it was impossible to even adapt it. It was impossible. Like, the systems aren't compatible, the ideas aren't the same. It's a completely different approach. So, for nostalgia, this guy took software with him, or code, and he went to federal prison, and he never used it. He never used it. So that leaves us with another thing, and that is this whole concept that we're making these artifacts, and they're so valuable that when we go to our new school or our next job, we need them, or we won't be able to do our jobs. But that's not the case. So an artifact, I use the word artifact because what we're talking about creating something at a certain point of time that has cultural or historical value to that context, to that location, to that space. But outside of that space, it might be interesting, but it's not really that useful. And we tend to believe that if I have like an email thread with my department for a week, and we come up with this really good policy, and we write it out, and it's like all ready to go, and we do a presentation and everybody loves it, that when I go to my next school, I can just take that policy and be like, boom, add water, policy. No, you got to start over. If you're making new policies, it's the same process. You might have some good ideas, but you're going to have meetings. And unless there's an emergency, like here's an example. Let's say you go into a new job, like as a school administrator, And you get there and realize they have zero safety and health policies. Zero. The first thing that you're going to do is go find a bunch of them that are licensed, maybe from a government that lets you reuse them, and you're going to take them and say, look, until we come up with a better idea, we're using these. That's a scenario, but that isn't that common. And still, even in that scenario, you're going to put those in play for liability, but you're going to go through each one of them and customize them. It's not just like a rubber stamp. You can't just say, boom, 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 let's use it. It's not going to happen. You're going to go through the process again. Lesson plans, everything. You're gonna meet new people and new kids and new administrators with new ideas. Your stuff is just not compatible. You still have your ideas, but you probably have those inside. Like you remember them. One of the best things that you could do is keep a blog or journal, because then it's more chronological, it's searchable, and you usually write those things in context. You connect them to a day or an event. So it helps you remember the reason you created the artifact, and not just the fact that you have an artifact. In summary, for today's weekly rant, the island of garbage, let's go through it. First, ideas evolve to artifacts. Artifacts are contextual, and they're not going to be useful everywhere. Artifacts should be placed in a repository, and a repository for schools like a curriculum map or a shared team drive or something like that. You need to get your artifacts out of your email, out of your personal storage, out of your laptop, whatever. You need to synthesize them with everybody else's, and you put them together. And then move on. Don't keep all that stuff in like 5 places. Just put it where it needs to go and move on. Ideas out of context are virtually useless. If you don't believe that, please research cargo cults. Just do that on your own. You can do it Wikipedia, or you can do a Google search, or you can go to a great podcast called Stuff You Should Know and listen to an amazing episode on cargo cults. That will explain to you how ideas out of context are useless and actually kind of damaging. It's just not good practice. New ideas and the creation of new artifacts should be an annual requirement. When people come to work every year, the norm shouldn't be, hey, I've taught this class for 3 years, give me the playbook. Shouldn't be like that. Not anymore, not in 2017. There are things that change all the time. One thing I love about reading about space is that it proves that we don't know anything about space, planets, or the solar system, because literally every week somebody else is wrong and something else is new. That's what's happening every day now. New information is coming out, so you need to make new artifacts. You shouldn't just be trying to regurgitate everything. But finally, if you want to be lazy, on your own with your own money and in a private lab somewhere, maybe buried deep in your home or your apartment, purchase a worksheet generator. Just stop using school technology altogether. It's more efficient and you'll look really clever. So this is what you need to do. There are generators that make math worksheets, English worksheets. Like, there's so many databases out there you can subscribe to that produce worksheets or like online quizzes. So I should say worksheet or / online quiz, all in real time here in IT Babble. Online quiz generator. Boom. You'll just go to work and be like amazing. You'll have like IB quizzes, IGCSE, AP, all of it. Just license it, like contact somebody and say, hey, I heard you have an IB like subject quiz generator or worksheet generator, and they'll be like, yeah, just purchase it on your own. Okay, you're gonna invest maybe $800 to $1,000, but then you'll have like 10 or 12 tools, and you'll be a genius. You just walk in every day with the freshest, most amazing content to hand out. If you want to do like worksheet based, inline, do A, then do B, then do C, get the answers immediately, you're super organized. Yeah, I mean, you haven't really thought about anything and you haven't planned anything, but your kids are busy, it's all topical, and you literally have to do no planning. It's just like a factory, right? That makes you look more clever than having 70, 80, 90 folders going back to 2002 with your favorite lesson plan. So just keep that in mind. There's a way to do everything the right way. All right? So this week's weekly rant is over. Please take your island of garbage and destroy it, and have a good week.